Hey there, it's Lara here from astrologymaven.com, and I'm back after a week off with your weekly horoscope video. So this one's for the week of July 14th to the 20th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So as you may have noticed, this week we are getting up close and personal as I'm recording in my bedroom, actually. So yeah, there's been some developments over here over the last couple of weeks. Right before we left for to head to the lake for a week or so, we had a friend of my son's move in. So you know, there's he needed some support, and we wanted to offer it to him, and so here we are. And in the meantime, we're kind of trying to organize space in the house and make him his own space, which means that I will be losing my office. Which is okay. It's all for a good cause and the right reasons. And so it's just going to take a little while to sort things out. So I may be on various locations over the next few weeks, or maybe just in the bedroom here. I don't know. Anyway, so it's interesting because this is so very much related to the astrology I'm going to talk to you about. That's happening this week, and that's been building. And so I'll kind of relate that incident to how things are playing out in my own chart, to kind of give you an example and an idea of how astrology happens in real life, in the real world, as above, so below. So yeah, that's what's going on over here. Last week, I didn't do a video, as you may know, as you may have noticed. I did mention that I probably wasn't going to, because we were at the lake and I was just trying to take a break. It was still busy. We had some company, some visitors, and some friends that were in the same area that we met up with and that kind of thing. So anyway, I didn't get a chance to do the video, but we're coming off that Cancer new moon. And I did write about that on Facebook and on Instagram. So you may have seen that post if you follow me there. And if you don't, then please join me. The links to those are below. Because I do, I post there more frequently and write about the astrology and other things as well. And if I'm not here on YouTube, then unless I really can't, then I'm definitely going to at least write something about it there. So, and in weeks to come, hopefully more regularly in an email sort of newsletter. As you also may know, I'm in the process of launching my website and a course, and yeah, everything has sort of been delayed just because of what's been going on. So, as John Lennon said, right, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans, and truer words have not been spoken, that's for sure, in my experience. So yeah, we're coming off the Cancer new moon, and we are as far as the moon goes, if you see me looking down, it's because I have my laptop in front of me here. So the moon is in Virgo right now, and she will move into Libra on Thursday, Scorpio on Saturday, and Sagittarius on Monday. So, moon in Virgo days are good for getting things done, for checking off the ticky boxes, for taking care of our health even, or just the little details, for house cleaning, literally or metaphorically, for making lists, for analyzing things, gathering details and information, doing things that like even things like if you're somebody who's into, say, herbs or something like that, then Virgo moon days are good days to maybe if you make tinctures, or if you just are a gardener even, and you're doing things with herbs and plants. Virgo moon days are good for those too, because it is an earth sign, and Virgo is connected to our sense of sacred service and, you know, what we, like our routine, our mundane sort of reality, and taking care of all those things that make, you know, make the wheels spin efficiently, sort of thing. And that includes our physical body. So, all right. And also, just in case you don't have it yet, you can get my free guide to working with the moon over on my website. The link to that is below. And if you put in your name and your email address, you'll get the download automatically, and you'll get added to my email list so that you will be notified of when this website finally launches and some other things that are on the way. And if you were on my previous email list, but you haven't signed up for the new one yet, then please do that if you want to receive emails in the future, because I didn't transfer the names over manually. I just sort of wanted to leave that up to you. Okay, so we've talked about the moon a little bit, and now let's check off a few boxes, so to speak, in terms of what, speaking of Virgo moon, in terms of what is transpiring. Some of these things have just happened as you're getting this recording, but they're still relevant, and some of them are yet to happen. And we're going to focus the sign by sign forecast this week on the Sun and Pluto making an opposition to each other, which is happening later in the week. So that's going to be the bigger picture. This video may be a little bit shorter than they have been in the last while, although I always say that and it never ends up being. But I just have a lot to do, so I'm going to try to keep it a little bit more succinct. All right, so on the 12th, which was Monday, we had Mercury in Cancer in a trine with Jupiter in Pisces, right? And that happened at the very early degrees of those signs, of those water signs, 1 degree, because Jupiter is retrograding ever so slowly backwards through Pisces, through the first couple of degrees, and will re-enter Aquarius at the end of July to finish up, you know, whatever unfinished business Jupiter in Aquarius has, and we'll do that until the end of this year, and then in later December we'll move back into Pisces for a longer shift. So, and Mercury's now in Cancer out of Gemini, where it was for quite a long time because of the retrograde. So Mercury trine Cancer on Monday, and this may have been experienced, or may still be, you know, in the ether sort of thing, or in your personal experience, depending on how closely this interacts with your own chart placements. So if you have placements at the very early degrees of Cancer or Pisces, then you likely experienced this more personally, right? And so, yes, Nigella's in the window looking out at whatever birds and such are in the yard. So this is an aspect where it's like we can get some big ideas. You know, there's this element of turning our thoughts into dream, you know, bigger dreams. Mercury is this detail-oriented thought process, right, and communication process. It's the moving parts, and Jupiter is the big picture. So it's those two things, the details and the big picture, working in cooperation with each other, because a trine is an aspect of ease, of flow. And there could also be, like, when I think of Mercury Jupiter together, I also think of this whole notion of like communicating wisdom as well, because Jupiter is connected to that, or communicating justice in some way, perhaps. So that's Mercury trine Jupiter. And then what's next on the list? Well, as I'm actually recording this, I'm recording this on Tuesday to be published on Wednesday. We have Mars conjunct Venus in Leo, And I did post about this on Facebook and Instagram this morning too. So if you want to check that out, you can. But just to say a word about it here, this is the first time this conjunction has happened in about 2 years. And so it marks the beginning of a new cycle between Venus and Mars as they come together. So, and it happens at 19 degrees Leo. So if you have placements around that point in the chart, you will likely experience this on a more personal level, right? Or in angle to that. So 19 degrees are the other fixed signs, which would be Aquarius, Scorpio, and Taurus. And it's like when Mars and Venus meet up, Mars and Venus are both sort of like magnets. I wrote about this this morning. And Mars goes about getting the object of its desires by kind of going after it, right? Whereas Venus approaches that with a more sort of receptive way. It draws in what it wants. When the two come together, there is this sense of like, you know, it's like our desires are like coming into alignment, so to speak. And this particular Mars-Venus conjunction in Leo, if you think about the last 2 years and what's been going on, in terms of, you know, this aspect can speak very much to our relationships. And if you think just big picture, like COVID took a toll, right, on all our relationships. It definitely highlighted relationship issues of all kinds. And as Mars and Venus come together, it's like alchemizing that. It's like injecting new life into our battered relationships, if you will. And it also speaks to, you know, creativity, to our desires and our passions, and perhaps to our resources as well when we're talking about Venus. So that's what's going on with Mars and Venus. And then we have the Sun in trine with Neptune on the 15th, which is Thursday, right? And that happens at 23 degrees of Cancer and Pisces. So again, those two water signs. And that's a nice time to take a bit of a step back, to take a bit of a break if you can. Again, a trine is an aspect of support, right? And so Sun trine Neptune, it's this kind of like dreamy vibe. It's this like, it's kind of like floating on an air mattress in the water sort of thing, with the sun beating down on you. So it'll be a nice little bit of a reprieve or a retreat, I think, if we can get it. I hope you can hear me okay. I didn't plug the microphone in today, but I have a pretty loud voice, so generally I find that it works out okay. But if not, let me know. Definitely let me know. So what else do we have going on here before I get to Sun opposite Pluto? Well, we have the first quarter moon in Libra happening on the same day, actually, that the Sun and Pluto oppose each other. So that's on July 17th. In the early morning hours specifically, we have that first quarter moon in Libra. And when we have, so that's when, you know, the moon makes it's the first square aspect to where the moon was when she became new, right? So we have the new moon in Cancer, and now it's reaching the first quarter square phase of the lunar cycle. And so what happens at this part of the moon's monthly journey is that there tends to be a bit of we could call it a crisis in action, but it's where we get this, it's like the first real jolt of energy that is injected into whatever got off the ground or whatever seeds were planted at the new moon, right? And so it's kind of like we take that push forward. We make that push forward. We take perhaps a bold action in relation to, again, whatever seeds were planted at the new moon. So, and it can feel, because it's a square, squares are conversation of tension. They're dynamic. Squares require some kind of action to resolve the tension. So that's why taking action is good at this point. But it can feel a little bit tense and intense as well, because it is a square. So on that same day, as I was saying, and getting into the meat of what we're talking about here, is for the rest of the video, is the Sun in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn. And that's happening at 26 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn, respectively. That aspect is exact on July 17th. So on Saturday at about 6:45 p.m. Eastern time. So the Sun opposite Pluto. This is, when I was thinking about this, it's like this. Well, first of all, an opposition is a conversation of sort of push and pull, right? Where balance is required. Things are facing off. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum, or opposite points in the sky, looking head on at each other, and requiring some kind of coming together, in a sense. And so with Pluto and the Sun, there is this kind of fate, Pluto versus free will, the Sun vibe going on, as I see it. And the thing is, the phrase that came to mind when I was thinking about this is resistance is futile, right? I remember writing a blog post with that title many years ago. And it seems to be very much the case when we're thinking about the will of the gods, so to speak, the gods, the goddesses, right? The universe, whatever you want to call it, versus our old individual, human will and our free will, so to speak. And really, although we do have free will in many ways, there is also, I mean, you don't have to believe this, but this is what I believe. And in my experience, this is what is true. And I think that astrology teaches us this and reflects this, that ultimately we can have all the plans in the world and all the intentions in the world, but if those things do not line up with sort of the grander plan, then the will of the universe, the will of the gods, the goddesses, wins out. And so I think like our power as individuals, right, as humans, is allowing the universe or God, or whatever you want to call it, to work through us, rather than us trying to force the universe to bend to our will. That, in my experience, it never works. So we might think we have the upper hand sometimes. And there are things, I really, really do believe there are things that we can do, and actions that we can take, and choices that we can make that are better than others, right? But ultimately, things are out of our control for the most part. So, and I know not everybody wants to hear that, and not everybody likes to hear that. And truth be told, I didn't used to think that. I was very much of the opinion at one point in my life that I was in the driver's seat and that I could control the universe, and I could manifest and all of this stuff, right? But over time and life experience, I have come to see that as a bit of a, well, it's spiritual bypassing, among other things. It's not reality. It's just not reality. We have a certain amount of free will, but we don't have the last say. Let's put it that way. So Pluto is over there in Capricorn. And if you recall, right, we also had Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn for quite a while. And we had that, Saturn and Jupiter met up with Pluto, and then they moved on, and they met each other at the early degrees of Aquarius at the end of 2020. So they moved on into Aquarius, but Pluto is still there in Capricorn. Pluto still had unfinished business in Capricorn, and Pluto is still turning over the soil in Capricorn. It's that process of transmutation or transformation, or alchemy that happens when Pluto is involved. And it takes a long time. But if we look back on the house that Pluto occupies, or that Capricorn occupies in our chart, we can see how ever so slowly, and sometimes, in sort of fits and spurts, like if it's being triggered and some big event happens, there is this process of transformation happening for us personally in the Capricorn area of our chart, right? And collectively speaking, in terms of Capricorn themes of hierarchy, of tradition, of the structures and the bounds and the power structures, the authority structures, the patriarchy, the way it's always been. These themes are getting a major overhaul for us collectively. But this is also happening for us personally in our personal lives. And so I'm going to speak to my own personal experience in a minute, as I said I would, and I've already told you a little bit about it. But when we have the sun, our will, our kind of life force, right, in opposition with Pluto, we may encounter this sort of battle of wills, so to speak, or an issue that highlights the push and pull between our will and the greater will, the will of the universe. And this is happening on this axis of Cancer and Capricorn, which is the axis of sort of the great mother, Cancer, and the great father, Capricorn. So it can speak to things like parenting, self-parenting, reparenting, issues around, our own parental figures. It can speak to things that have to do with legacy. So our ancestors and the legacy, we were left versus the ancestors we are becoming, because we are all becoming ancestors, right? One of these days, we will no longer be in this physical incarnation, and those that come after us will call us ancestors. We will be the ancestors. So what kind of ancestors are we shaping up to be is a question we might want to ask ourselves right now. So it can also, this Cancer Capricorn axis can also highlight our work at home, in our sort of private sphere, in our family, on the home front, versus our work out in the world, which is Capricorn. It can highlight the past, you know, and our history, so to speak, and what we are sort of striving to become, which is the Capricorn piece, or striving to achieve. It can highlight the tension between our emotional security and our material security, right? Two opposite sides there of the same coin. So those are some overall themes that may be highlighted with this opposition between Saturn and the Sun. And what's interesting here is that in my own chart, being a Virgo rising, I have Cancer Capricorn in the 11th and 5th houses. So the 11th house speaks to the group. It speaks to our collaborations. It speaks to our vision for the future and our supporters, our allies, our larger network. And the 5th house is about children, and it's about our individual contribution and you know, our creative projects. It's about what sparks joy for us, how we have fun in life. And so for me personally, one of the ways that this conversation has been playing out over the last, really, like, if I look back, you know, it's been, as Pluto moved into my 5th house, is sort of when kids started to come into the picture for me personally. And as my children are now teenagers and things are evolving, right? That 5th house is really being transformed, that 5th house, but also very much in opposition to the 11th house. And I feel like, among other things, what I've noticed personally is that there's been a lot going on in terms of my kids and their friendships and friendship groups, which is 5th, 11th house axis. And also how what's going on with kids is, you know, at times there is a push and pull between that and the group, like potentially my friendship groups, my larger networks and allies and supporters, and my ability to even, you know, for example, like trying to grow a business and trying to attract, you know, clients and supporters and that kind of thing, and allies, which is 11th house, and then how that's been in tension with the needs of children, right? And even impacting sort of my ability to kind of, you know, have fun in life and that sort of thing. So, you know, as the Sun approaches this opposition to Pluto, we've got now another teenager in the house. And so, you know, that whole transformation is continuing, and really interesting how it's like, it's my son's friend, right? 5th, 11th house. So anyways, that's just kind of a little bit about how this is playing out for me personally. And I wanted to say a couple of other pieces before I go through each of the signs. At the same time that we have this Sun-Pluto opposition, the Sun is also in trine with Neptune. Remember that I said that earlier. And so, and a trine, right? An opposition is tension. It's push and pull. As I was saying to you, a trine is support. Oh, Nigel is trying to get out of the room. Just wait. Pretty soon. And so we do have some support here. I feel like it's as if, you know, the universe is saying, yes, you know, things may not be going according to plan, or, you know, you may not be able to exercise your free will as you had hoped, or try as you might. exercising your free will, it's you know, it's not working out for you. There is there are obstacles and in the way, and there are delays and all of those things that a Saturn ruled sign, Capricorn, can bring. But Neptune in trine with the sun is like the universe saying, have faith, trust in, you know, the invisible forces, and all will be well. So that's the way I'm choosing to see that. And in mythology, Neptune and Pluto were brothers, and they were the brothers of Jupiter. And together, the big three, so to speak, Neptune, Pluto, and Jupiter, they ruled the world, right? So Neptune was ruler of the seas, Pluto ruler of the underworld, and Jupiter, the big guy, ruler of heaven and earth, so to speak. And so Jupiter was the god of all gods. And we do have, right, we just had that trine between Jupiter and Mercury going on. We have Jupiter in its home sign of Pisces still before it dips back into Aquarius. So Jupiter having strength there. And I think it's interesting that, and incidentally, the father of Jupiter and Pluto and Neptune was Saturn. Saturn, who rules Capricorn and Aquarius, where big things have been happening. And it's like a handing over of the baton, right? From the old Saturn, who was the authority, the father figure, you know, gradually kind of making way for what's to come. And I think it's really interesting anyways that all three, Pluto, Neptune, and Jupiter, are featured in the astrology this week. So there's a sense of the larger forces at play, and I'm really trying to personally dig into that and try to kind of, rather than be frustrated about you know, a wrench being kind of thrown into my personal plans and what, like, you know, my personal will wants, and what the universe wants for me or wants to happen. And that's not to say I'm just like, here I am doing the video, right? I'm making the best of it. I'm in the bedroom. I didn't just go, well, can't do the video today, so forget about it. So I used my personal will to work within the bounds of the greater will, so to speak. Because there's obviously, I don't want to be one of those people like everything happens for a reason, right? Because I know that sounds trite and that sounds very, it's not necessarily helpful to say that to somebody if they are grieving or going through a difficult time. But at the same time, I do very much feel, and after 52 years of life experience, where my my free will has been, try as I might, has not had the last word. I can say that, you know, I've developed a sense of trust in what's meant to be, so to speak, in that interplay of fate and free will. And so I really see this as the crux of astrology as well, right? It's the interplay of fate and free will. And so my point is, because I'm rambling a lot going on up here, even more so than usual, which is hard to believe, but it's like, there's this sense of surrendering to what wants to happen, right? That's the Neptune piece too, the Neptune trine the sun piece, surrendering your will to the greater will. And again, that doesn't mean that you lie down and let people walk all over you, or that you throw your hands up in the air and just say, you know, screw it. It's more a sense of accepting. Acceptance is a big word there, I think, in this situation. Accepting what's happening. And knowing that ultimately there is a greater reason for that, even though we might not understand what it is in the moment. You know, it's about that having faith. So, okay, ramble. I'm going to move on now to take it through the signs, and we're going to speak to the sun opposing Pluto through the signs. And we are talking, oh my goodness, somebody is very talkative. Speaking of talking, we're going to address, as we always do, rising sign first and foremost, but also you can listen for your sun and your moon sign. But in these general forecasts, rising sign is really, it tends to be the most accurate or reflective of our real world experience. And I'm using whole sign houses in case you're wondering. So we're going to take it through the signs. I'm going to speak to Sun in Cancer opposite Pluto in Capricorn. So we're going to talk about the axis this is playing out on, and where you are likely feeling this tension in your life and this need to kind of, you know, surrender your free will to a certain degree to the will of the universe, right? And how doing that can ultimately lead to a greater sense of purpose. The sun speaks to our purpose. So that's what we're going to talk about. I also want to mention, before I dive in, that, you know, if you, and I don't know if I said this already, if I did, apologies, but if you have placements around the 26 degree mark, give or take a few degrees on either side of Capricorn, Cancer, or the other fixed signs of Aries and Libra, and I'm laughing because once again, this is hitting my Saturn-Venus conjunction in Aries, like everything has over the last few years. And again, this is in the 8th house for me. This is my entanglements with other people, and really how that impacts me and how I don't really have a lot of control over that, right? So learning to surrender. But if you have major placements around that 26 degree mark of the fixed signs, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Aries, then you're likely to experience this sort of on a more personal level. And that, you know, whether that be your sun, your rising, you know, your ascendant, your moon sign, or a personal planet like Mars, Mercury, Venus, you know, something significant there, then you're likely to have a more personal experience with this Sun-Pluto opposition. All right, so let's dive in. Let's take it through the signs. We're going to start with Cancer because the sun is in your sign, shining its light there. And this is, so this is where we're going to start. It's in your first house if you're Cancer rising. The sun is in your first house. Pluto is opposite the sky in your 7th house. This is hitting the axis of your personal relationships, right? First house, self, 7th house, other. Sun is in the first house of self. That's where your free will is, right? The sun speaking to your sense of personal will. And Pluto is in your 7th house of the other, of your significant one-to-one relationships, of contracts and agreements. And so there's something going on here that is likely, I mean, it's not likely just, this is not new to you. Let's put it that way. Because, again, Pluto's been in Capricorn doing its thing for quite a long time now. And so it's not a new thing, but the sun is casting its light onto that issue and highlighting it right now. So there is this tension between what you want, quite literally, the will, that's your first house of self, of you and you your interactions with the world, right? It's how you interface with the world is the first house, how you come at the world, and it speaks to your physical vitality and body, and so this will, this sun in your first house is facing off with the greater will of Pluto in the seventh house, and Pluto is over there in your seventh house, turning over the soil and transforming and alchemizing your close personal relationships. And this may speak to a specific relationship, like a marriage partner or something going on with a significant other in your life, whether that be, again, a marriage partner or you know, another kind of partner, a business partner, a close friend or family member, or some kind of contract or agreement that's relevant to you. And there is, you know, Pluto's over there really saying this might be uncomfortable. It might not be what you think you want or what you know, your ego, your will says you want, but this is what's happening. And so deal with it, so to speak, right? That's what Pluto, because Pluto's the, you know, Pluto really gives, excuse my language, but Pluto gives zero fucks, really. Pluto is like, doesn't really care if your feelings are hurt or if this is not how you want things to go. Pluto is really peeling back the layers of the onion. It's cutting to the bone. It is really getting down and dirty, and like I said, turning over the soil, composting, transforming, right? That seventh house area for you. So this is what's happening for you. This is where this tension is playing out on this axis of relationship of self and other. Ultimately, you know, like I said, resistance is futile, but that does not mean that you lay down and you kind of just like forfeit your own will. It's like, how can you bring these things together? How can you ultimately, you know, how can your will interact with the will of the universe for the best kind of outcome? And how can you accept that, you know, that process of transformation that's going on with your relationship, or relationships in some, it could be having to do with the relationship you have with yourself as well, right? When we're talking about this axis. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there, Cancer, and I move to Gemini now, where we have this Sun-Pluto opposition playing out in your second and eighth houses. This is the axis of form in the physical kind of world and transformation. This is the axis of resources, your personal resources, your money, finances, time, energy, material possessions, sense of value, which is second house, versus other people's resources. So the money of your partner or of your clients, or money exchanged with organizations or institutions. So things like taxes, wills, you know, inheritance, bursaries, loans, debt, credit cards, anything like that, mortgages. This is all eighth house. Other people's resources. The eighth houses are entanglements with other people, right? It's kind of like where we don't really have, like, we're not separate from, we can't exercise our will separately from our entanglements with other people. And so, you know, I mean, for example, like, let's take a real simple kind of real life example. When you have the eighth house, among other things, has to do, you know, taxes is one of the things that it speaks to. So you have to pay your taxes. And if you don't, things happen. You know, you can't just say, I'm not going to do that. I mean, you can, but there's consequences for that. Or, you know, the eighth house also speaks to our intimate relationships, like our intimate connections. And so therefore it often reflects our psychological sort of wounding, right? And a healing, and the skeletons in the closet. So which come about from our entanglements with other people. And so it's hard to separate yourself from those enmeshments when we're talking about the eighth house. So all that to say, when we're talking about the Sun-Pluto opposition, you've got the Sun in the second house right now in Cancer, which is your personal will, right? In the house of your resources, the money you make from your, you know, whatever you do out in the world, how you spend your time and energy to get your basic needs met, what you place value on, your sense of self-worth. The Sun, your will, is there, but opposite the sky is Pluto, who is slowly transforming those eighth house themes that I just spoke about. And, you know, there may be something going on there that's bigger picture, that's deeper, that's more powerful. Pluto, I didn't even speak about that when it comes to Pluto. Pluto is very much about power and control. And so there is this sense of your resources and other people's resources, and how those two things are in tension, and how, you know, your will ultimately wants one thing, but the greater will is saying something else. And so how do we bring those two things together? How do we accept that we're not always in control, and that we may wish to, for example, you know, we may wish to do one thing with our money, but because of our enmeshments with other people or institutions, we have other priorities that we have to take care of before we can have the freedom to kind of spend at will, so to speak. So that's just one thing I can think of. I'm trying to think of another specific example to give you, Gemini, but essentially, you know, when we're talking about this axis of resources or physical form versus transformation, there's a sense that if we try too hard to exercise our own will and have control ultimately over our personal resources, then, you know, things may not go according to plan, because the universe has other plans right now, and we need to accept that and work within those parameters. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there for you, Gemini. I think that gives you something to go on, definitely. I'm going to move to Taurus now. So, Taurus, for you, this Sun-Pluto opposition is hitting your 3rd and 9th houses. And so, you've got the Sun, your will, your personal will, in the 3rd house of your immediate environment, short distance travel, communications, commerce, marketing, you know, the people in your immediate environment. So this is like siblings, cousins, peers, friends who feel like siblings, kind of thing, those sort of people. And then the 9th house is where Pluto is, and that is speaking to foreign people and places, our worldview, our belief system, the bigger picture, higher learning, right? Whereas the 3rd house, like, this is an axis that deals with information and communication, and both of these both of these houses speak to these themes of teaching and learning to a degree, but the third house is more the basics. So literally it can be things like, you know, early learning, elementary school, high school, learning the basics. And then the ninth house is more higher learning. So it is what goes on beyond those years, right? Or outside that realm. So college, university, postgraduate, courses you're taking online, you know, that kind of go beyond the basics. Your things that you learn through people and places that are different from you, that expand your horizons in the ninth house. And so the ninth house here, in the third house is your free will, right? The sun, your will, your sense of like purpose. And you have one idea about things and it may be very localized, and it may be, which is third house, it may be very you know, on the ground level in terms of teaching and learning. It may involve people like siblings, neighbors, community, that kind of thing. It may involve short travel. It may involve your daily communications. And then across the sky is Pluto, exercising Pluto's powerful will in your ninth house, which is, you know, Pluto is kind of transforming that area of the chart that speaks to the ninth house themes. And so there's some kind of tension going on here between your individual will and the greater will. And ultimately, like I'm thinking about an example where maybe you are maybe you have some kind of a business that you run, and you want to really focus on local, right? Like you're trying to keep it local, dealing with your local community, grassroots kind of level. But something is drawing you to a wider view. And so ultimately, like, resistance is futile there, right? Pluto is is transforming that ninth house and changing the way over time that these things look in your life, right? These bigger picture themes. And so ultimately you may be trying to keep it small and local and detailed, and Pluto is kind of saying, but there's something here about the bigger picture. There's something here about the wider philosophy. There's something here about potentially higher learning, you know, or what you can learn from other people who are different from you, and maybe from foreign places. This could even involve like something having to do with a potential move, you know, from more local to more far away, or something like that. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else specific that I can say about that. It could be like, you know, you're teaching like a beginner course in something, and there's this draw to do something more big picture, more higher minded kind of thing. And so your personal will is saying, keep it local, right? Or keep it simple, or keep it basic. And then the will of Pluto is saying, but in the grander scheme of things, this is where the big work needs to happen, right? In the 9th house. So I hope that makes sense to you, Taurus. I'm taking a lot longer than I anticipated here. So I'm going to move on to Aries, and we're talking for you, Aries, about the 4th and the 10th house axis. So the sun is sitting in your 4th house. Pluto is in your 10th house. They are facing off, right? The sun in the 4th house, so your personal will and sense of purpose is in the 4th house of home, family, roots, ancestry, place of living, emotional security. These are the natural houses of Cancer and Capricorn. And then Pluto is up there in the 10th house of your worldly ambitions and the legacy you wish to leave, and your career and your relationship to authority and authority figures, and your own sense of authority in the world. And so there is something going on here. There's this tension at play, right? Where you are trying to exercise your will in the realm of the 4th house, and then Pluto has some news for you in the 10th house, you know, and resistance is futile ultimately. The 10th house is being gradually, ever so gradually turned over and transfigured and transformed by Pluto. And this is a moment of your will versus the greater will, so to speak. And so it's like ultimately the ability to accept what wants to happen will, I think, lead to the best outcome for everyone. And so trying to work against that is counterproductive. So you may be really focused on, you know, your will may be centered around something going on the home front. But Pluto is ultimately saying, but there is something more important that needs to be addressed out here in the wider public world, in terms of maybe your career or your again, the legacy you wish to leave, or your relationship to authority, right? This is the axis, like I spoke about, like this axis of parenting, in a sense, when I see that as like self-parenting even, you know, that sense of the great mother and great father, so to speak. And there's something at play there between these two energies for you, Aries. So it's not to say that you throw your hands up in the air and give up, right? It's not to say that there is nothing of value in exercising your free will. But right now, at this moment in time, there is this need to kind of acquiesce to the greater powers that be, so to speak, who are drawing your attention to those 10th house themes. So you may be focusing, or your will is focused around home, family, place of living, roots, but the greater will right now, or the greater, you know, the greater powers that be, when we're talking about Pluto, power is a good word, are drawing your attention to the more public side of life and your career and those things. Okay, I'm going to leave that there, Aries. We're moving on to Pisces now. Pisces, we've got this Sun-Pluto opposition hitting your 5th and 11th houses. So you've got the sun in your 5th house, right? That's your will, your sense of purpose, in the 5th house right now of children, of your individual self-expression, of what sparks joy for you, how you have fun in life, romance, those sorts of hobbies, you know, those sorts of things. And then you've got Pluto over there in the 11th house of the group, of your allies and supporters and networks, friendship groups and other kinds of groups, of your vision for the future. And so ultimately, like this tension here, it's like you're exercising your will, or you want to exercise your will, and you see your purpose right now as having to do with those fifth house themes. But then Pluto across the sky in your 11th house is saying, right now in this moment, these 11th house themes are what's most powerful or important, or what kind of has the upper hand, what you know, the greater will of the universe is really asking you to focus on. And so somehow the idea here is to try to balance those two things, to try to bring those two things into harmony when we have an opposition. And when we're talking about this whole notion of our free will versus fate, so to speak, what's fated, it's about not us laying down and you know, getting run over by life, or just being taken out, and or throwing our hands up and saying, you know, I give up. It's about working within the bigger picture energy of the moment, which is, you know, what Pluto is asking us to do. Pluto's saying there is a big transformation at play in your 11th house. A lot of things have been changing and transforming and being alchemized in that 11th house over the years. And this is a moment where that's really being highlighted, and where the will of the universe is ultimately you know, saying, if you want to make this easier on yourself right now, then don't resist what's wanting to happen, or what's, you know, what Pluto is trying to overhaul in the 11th house. And again, this could have to do with things going on with your kids and their friends, even, or your kids and your friendships. Like, it's on that same axis as a Pisces rising, right? It's the same axis as Virgo rising, because you're opposite signs, but it's just flipped. And so for me, this is like, I have a Pisces sun and I'm Virgo rising. So it's really, really highlighting these themes for me in my own life. So that's for you, Pisces. I'm going to move to Aquarius now. And Aquarius, for you, this Sun Pluto opposition is hitting your 6th and 12th houses. So the Sun, your sense of personal will and purpose, is sitting in the 6th house of your daily routine, of how you are in service, of your physical health and well-being, your sort of mundane tasks in life, right? The day-to-day toil and labor that goes into running your life. And then the 12th house of rest and respite, and isolation and solitude, and what goes on behind closed doors, and what goes on behind the curtain, so to speak. And that can include in your unconscious. 12th house can speak to things like our self-sabotaging behaviors, or our dream life, or our spiritual connections and our spiritual, you know, well-being, whereas the 6th house is more about our physical well-being. So this is the axis of, I like to call it sometimes the axis of practical magic, practical being the 6th house, the magical part being the 12th house, or the axis of order, which is the 6th house, versus chaos, which is the 12th house, right? And so there is there's something going on here. There's this tension at play where your personal will is in the 6th house, and the will of Pluto is in the 12th house. There is some deep transformation going on, and has been for quite some time, and it's hitting this point of being highlighted right now in relation to the 12th house themes of some of the things I already mentioned, but also things like endings and losses, and places that are tucked away from the world. This may involve things like spiritual retreat centers, or detention facilities, even prisons, hospices, hospitals, those kinds of institutions that are tucked away from the world. It's even things like, 12th house is like how you spend time in solitude, like retreating from the world, or isolation, or in recovery, or convalescence. The 12th house can also speak. The 12th house is kind of like, it can be our blind spot, right? Things that are happening that we're not really aware of. They're kind of in our periphery. We don't know that they're there. And that can include, like I said, the subconscious, and things like our self-sabotaging behaviors. So there is something going on there that Pluto is slowly but surely trying to transform. And right now is saying, this is the greater will. This is where you need to put your attention. You need to acquiesce or bend to a certain degree your personal will that may be more focused on, your daily routine and your health and your all those things you do on the day-to-day, whether they be, paid or unpaid, that, could be through your work, your daily work. But daily work is not always paid work. So we have to remember that. So there's this interplay going on there. And the idea is to do what you can do, but not fool yourself into thinking that you are ultimately completely and totally in the driver's seat, right? There are greater forces at work, and they are having a say right now. And trying to draw your attention to that piece. So, okay, we're going to leave it there, Aquarius. We're moving to Capricorn now, where we've got this happening on, once again for you, the axis of relationship, right? Which is the same as Cancer, your opposite sign, only the houses are flipped. So for you, Capricorn, you've got the seventh house is where the sun is for you right now, which is the house of the other, of people that you are in close personal relationship with. It can speak to your one-to-one relationships. It can speak to what's going on with the significant people in your life. And it can also speak to things like contracts and agreements. And that's where your personal sort of will is. But then, and purpose, that sense of purpose, the sun. But then Pluto is over there in the first house, transforming you, right? The first house is the house of self, your interface, how you interface with the world, how you put yourself out there, how you interact with the world, come at the world, how the world perceives you. Also very much, first house is very much about your physical vitality and health and body, and it even can have to do with your appearance. So that's a big deal. Pluto in your first house. Capricorn risings have been going through big transformation, and this is a point, where the universe, oh, here's Nigella, where the universe is saying ultimately, you may have these other plans that you're wanting to happen over there in the seventh house, that you're trying to exercise your will in relationship or in terms of contracts and agreements. But Pluto is saying, I'm exercising my great power here and drawing your attention to yourself right now and what is happening there and the importance and significance of that. And so there's this dynamic of what you want and what other people want, kind of thing, or what your partner wants, or a significant other wants, somebody else in your life wants, what a contract or an agreement wants, and what ultimately is the bigger picture, what the universe wants for you very specifically, and your physical self, and how you interface with life, right? So like maybe, for example, you're wanting a relationship, right? That's where the sun is in your seventh house right now. Maybe you're wanting a relationship or wanting to put your focus there, but the universe is ultimately saying right now, at this moment in time, is for you to focus on the deep transformation that's going on with you. And so these two things may be at odds. How can you bring your will into balance with the will of, with the greater will, so to speak, right? Um, so that's what's going on for you right now, Capricorn. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now, where we have this Sun Pluto opposition playing out in your 8th and 2nd houses. So the Sun is in your 8th house and Pluto is in your 2nd house. So for you, Sagittarius, the Sun in the 8th house right now is the light of your will, right? Your ego, your sense of purpose is the Sun. Focusing on this, on other people's needs and resources, and your enmeshments and entanglements with other people. And this can have to do with our psychological intimacy, sexual intimacy, monetary intimacy. It can have to do with, the sort of skeletons in the closet, our psychological depths, other people's resources in a very real sense. So other people's money, time, and energy, right? 8th house is often referred to as the house of death and taxes, and death being sometimes literal, but more readily metaphorical. So this process of transformation that we've come to see it as, from one form to another kind of thing. So we do see things like taxes, insurance, mortgages, wills, inheritance, bursaries, loans, that sort of thing play out in the 8th house, most definitely. But it's generally this sense of how we are entangled with other people and their resources. And then, so that's where you're kind of like your will is right now, your sense of purpose, of individual purpose. And then, but the bigger picture here, or Pluto, the bigger, energy is, or the more kind of long-term, I guess, energy, because Pluto has been in Capricorn for a very long time and will remain there for a little bit still, for a couple more years. It's slowly but surely turning over the soil and transforming your own personal resources and how you relate to those. So your own personal finances, your money, also your time and your energy, and how you spend those things to get your basic needs met. It's about what you put value on and your sense of self-worth. So Pluto is transforming something there. Pluto is digging deep there. Pluto is taking you to the depths when it comes to your personal resources and how you get your basic needs met, right? And how you hair in my eye, how you nourish yourself as well. And that can be quite literally through food in the 2nd house. But there's this, for the moment at least, Pluto's facing off with the Sun and saying, that's all well and good. This is where your will is having to do with your entanglements with other people right now. That's where the Sun is. But I'm telling you that what the bigger issue is at the moment are your personal resources. And so that's where ultimately you should be acquiescing to a degree, meaning not you don't throw your hands up in the air. You don't say I give up. But there is an element of surrender and acceptance that needs to go on when Pluto is involved. And so Pluto is saying there's something you need to accept here. There's something you need to surrender to when it comes to your own personal resources. So it's I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe somebody is asking you to loan them money. Okay, that would be an 8th house theme. And there is a part of you, your personal will or purpose, who feels like that's the thing you should do right now. Or, this, it could be maybe not even money. It could be somebody is kind of asking a lot of your resources, of your time and energy. It could be money, could be time, could be energy, you know, intimacy. And so that's what's kind of drawing your attention and your personal sort of purpose right now. But then Pluto in the second house is saying, really, the bigger picture here has to do with your personal resources. And so maybe that's what you should be focusing on right now instead. Or is there a way you can have some give and take between these two things? What other people need from you, want from you, your enmeshments with other people and their money, time, energy versus your own money, time, energy, and worth, right? And so for the time, it's like Pluto needs you to kind of to bend your will a little, to focus on your personal resources. So, okay, I hope that makes sense, Sagittarius. I'm going to move on to Scorpio now. My voice is getting a little tired. But Scorpio, for you, this is happening on your 9th and 3rd, on that axis of the mind. So higher mind, 9th house versus, you know, lower mind, which makes it sound like one is better than the other. And it's not really. It's like the 9th house speaks to a sense of higher perspective, bigger picture things, higher learning. And the 3rd house speaks to more things that are in your immediate awareness and environment and people, right, as well. Whereas the 9th house is foreign people and places. The 3rd house is more your community, the people that you interact with on the day-to-day, be they siblings, cousins, neighbors, friends who feel like family, teammates, peers, that kind of thing. 3rd house is localized kind of travel. 9th house is farther distance travel. 3rd house is the daily communications, thoughts, ideas, perspectives. 9th house is bigger picture or worldview. So there's something going on here where right now the sun is in your 9th house, and that's your personal will and purpose, that maybe you are feeling like that's where you want to put your attention right now, on those 9th house things. But the universe is saying, but there is something about your local environment and the people in it, and maybe like your if you're somebody that deals in education, this could have to do with like teaching and learning, you know, elementary, sort of high school level, or learning the basics or teaching the basics of something, or communication and marketing, writing, you know, these kinds of things. And that is where Pluto is saying, okay, right now, in the bigger picture, in the grander scheme of things, there's work that needs to be done here. I'm trying to get you to focus on these things. And your personal will is over there challenging me in the 9th house, and wanting to focus on the bigger picture, or wanting to focus on the far away, perhaps, on the horizon. And Pluto's like, but it needs to be local right now. You need to keep it local, right? Or more in your sphere right now. And so how can those two things work together? How can you marry your personal will with the greater will of Pluto, so to speak, and for the best outcome ultimately, right? So I'm going to leave that there, Scorpio. I'm going to move it on to Libra now, where we have the 10th and the 4th houses being highlighted. So you've got the sun in your 10th house of public life, of career, of worldly ambition, of authority and authority figures, and your sense of authority, of the legacy you wish to leave. That is where your sort of personal will power is right now, or your sense of ego or purpose, right? The sun, your motivation. And But Pluto's over there in your fourth house, slowly but surely turning over the soil and trying to transform that fourth house of home, family, roots, place of living, your sense of emotional security, your ancestry, the legacy you have been left, these sorts of things. And Pluto is in this moment saying, yes, I know that your personal will or motivation is trying to draw you towards these 10th house themes, but I'm saying there's something here that needs your attention. And so can your personal will work with the greater will for the best outcome right now? It's a test of wills, so to speak. And as I was saying in the intro, when we're talking about our free will versus this sense of like greater fate, it really is a case of resistance is usually futile. There is, sometimes we have to acquiesce to what wants to happen versus what we want to happen. And so I think that gives you enough to go on. If you have any questions or comments, then please leave them below and I will address them definitely. So my voice is getting really tired, so I'm going to move on here to Virgo. Virgo, for you, this is hitting your 11th, 5th house axis. So you've got the sun in your 11th house and Pluto in your 5th house, right? And I was speaking to this a little bit earlier because this is my personal experience, and because I'm a Virgo rising. So with the sun in our 11th house, right now our sort of motivation or our personal will, if you will, our ego is focused on things like the group, our allies, our supporters, our networks, our friendships, or groups, the larger group kind of thing, our vision for the future. And that's what we are ultimately, it's kind of what our motivation is right now, right? What our ego is motivated by. But then we've got Pluto over there in the 5th house, who's been there for quite a while doing the work, and is drawing our attention in this moment in time to what still needs to be tended to in the 5th house. The work isn't finished yet. Pluto is nearing the end of its journey in Capricorn, but not there yet. And so Pluto is asking us to face what still needs, what wants to happen, to bend to the greater will of the universe, and realize that there's something there that is continuing to transform, that needs our attention, right? In that 5th house of children, of our individual creative self-expression and those kinds of projects, creative projects, of how we have fun in life, of even things like romance and hobbies and those sorts of things, what sparks joy for us. So there's still work going on in the 5th house, and right now this conversation, this push and pull between the sun and Pluto is saying, I know this is what you want to be focusing on, but this is what you need to be focusing on. So how can you bend your personal will to acquiesce a little to the greater will for the moment, right? And ultimately, because that's what needs to happen and that's what wants to happen, even if we don't necessarily understand it right now. So, okay, you may be wanting like, say, I don't know, just something really simple. Like maybe you're wanting to connect more with the group, whatever that means to you, or friendships or whatever. And you're wanting that to put your focus there, and, your will and your motivation is there. But Pluto is saying there's something deeper here that needs dealing with, that has to do with like maybe your kids, or maybe your creative projects, or, how you have fun kind of thing. So that's what's going on, Virgo rising. And I hope that's helpful. And we're going to move on to, last but not least in this case, Leo. Leo, for you, this is happening on your 12th, 6th house axis. So you've got the sun in the 12th house. And that's kind of where you're like your ultimate sort of will and ego and purpose is shining right now. And then Pluto in the 6th house is the bigger picture and the larger will of the universe, so to speak. And so you're maybe motivated, or your personal will is wanting a retreat right now, 12th house, wanting you to withdraw, wanting you to rest, recuperate, wanting you to take a break. This is also speaking, 12th house speaks to things like, our blind spots and what we're not really consciously aware of, what's going on behind the scenes, even in our unconscious, even our self-sabotaging behaviors. Even secrets being kept from us, or communications that are happening that we're not privy to, or things that go on behind closed doors at certain institutions like rehab centers and hospitals and hospices and spiritual retreat centers and those kinds of places, or just how we spend time in rest and reflection and solitude and isolation and all of those things, right? It's like that place where we just lay down and sleep. It's like, our spiritual life and our mental health and our that sense of recuperation and things like we may just feel like we need a break right now, Leo rising, or people with a lot of Leo energy. But the greater will of Pluto is over there in the 6th house of the daily grind, of your daily tasks that you do and you have to do to keep the wheels turning smoothly, to keep, life running. And those tasks may be paid or unpaid. They may have to do with your daily work that you are paid for, or your daily work that you're not paid for. 6th house is the house of toil and labor. And it's also very much related to health and illness. So, and the routines around that. And so there's something going on here, and it could have to do with pets in the 6th house as well. There's something going on here where Pluto is drawing your attention and saying, I know that you might need a break from all this right now, but there is a deeper transformation going on. And right now you need to pay some attention to those 6th house themes, and maybe acquiesce your personal will, right? The sun in the 12th, to the greater will, Pluto in the 6th, of what ultimately wants to happen, so that, you can kind of be that. I never said this to anybody else, but it's coming to mind right now, that phoenix rising from the ashes is very much a Plutonian, visual kind of thing. And so taking care of the day-to-day and taking care of your health and those sorts of things are ultimately what the universe wants from you right now, so that that's the bigger picture plan, shall we say, right? So, okay, I think that's enough to go on, Leo, and that's all 12 signs. So much longer, as always, than I anticipated, but not 2 hours at least. And I hope you found this helpful, and I wish you all the best. Let me know how this is playing out in your own life. I'd really, really be interested in hearing about that. And I will hopefully be back next week. That's the plan, unless life happens. But you can always catch me on Facebook and Instagram, because if I don't show up here, I will definitely post there and tell you why, at least, or allude to it, or give you some some astro tidbits that can help you through your week and help you navigate things. So take good care. I will hopefully see you next week. All right. Bye for now.